Welcome to the latest in Sustainable Investors series of interviews with leading asset owners. We're recording at the end of October, just a few weeks away from COP30, where governments will discuss and update their efforts to address two major systemic risks: climate change and biodiversity loss. These risks are intertwined, of course, and they are also among the most important facing universal owners, such as large pension funds, who cannot avoid them through diversification or divestment. The approaches available to universal owners, including some perhaps not widely yet deployed, have been explored in a new report published by the large Swedish pension fund AP7. So I'm delighted to be joined by Emma Sjöström, who recently joined as Head of Sustainable Communications. Welcome, Emma. Before we start, would you be so kind as to introduce yourself, your role at the firm, your background, and also how you expect your role to evolve in terms of supporting the company's, the scheme's engagement with policymakers and other stakeholders?
Thank you for having me. I've been with the AP7 since May of this year, so about half a year. And prior to joining AP7, I was working as an academic researcher at the Stockholm School of Economics. And my research interest was always active ownership and shareholder engagement. And I had been working with AP7. I had interviewed them and also other public pension funds and etc. So I've been following their work for the past probably 20 years. And so it's a great opportunity to now be on the inside and get to do more hands-on work and think together about these issues.
Okay, fantastic. So let's get into the the subject of one of these big systemic risks that AP7 and other universal owners are having to address as an example of what we're kind of talking about here. So it'd be useful to get a sense of how you're assessing biodiversity loss and within the kind of realm of other nature-related risks to the scheme's portfolios.
Yes, biodiversity loss is obviously one of the key systemic risks that we face. And we had, for that reason, a 3-year thematic work around deforestation and biodiversity between 2021 and 2023. And that was an opportunity. We always work in 3-year themes, and it's an opportunity to deep dive into that for a period of time. And so that within that time frame was also when the task force for nature-related disclosures was launched. So it was natural for us to join that, and I can talk more about that. But one of the things that we did was to use that as an opportunity to also go through our own holdings and identify our dependencies on biodiversity and nature, and also our impact. So that was very enlightening. It turned out that 86% of our equity portfolio is highly dependent on ecosystem services and nature. And it's only a very small fraction that has a low dependency, and really in all sectors. So, but especially so the utilities and the material sector. So that's been helpful for us, and we did it partly for ourselves, but also partly to trailblaze for others and show. Give an example of how this can be done and that it can be done. And so that was part of that work. And that, of course, helps us also guide our stewardship activities and to be able to focus those where it makes most sense, and to forward various kinds of demands on companies to be transparent and assess their risks and dependencies and impacts, etc. So that's been really useful. And then, of course, as a universal owner, which I guess we'll get into more as we talk about this, but just being a part of that task force, there were actually only two asset owners. At first, it was just ourselves, and then also NBIM, who were asset owner representatives in the steering committee for developing the TNFD. So that was an important work to represent the system's perspective, because TNFD, in the steering committee, you had everything from service providers to companies to asset managers, and then the two of us were the asset owners who really were taking that broad system level perspective that I think is so key here. So that was a contribution that we felt we could make to move this forward within the entire industry.
Okay, great. So I mean, let's get into the kind of the kind of high level, kind of broaden things out in terms of how does AP7 define and act on the responsibilities of universal owners in relation to systemic risks, and perhaps following that up with to what extent you would say that you're applying systems thinking in the area of biodiversity loss?
Yes, we very much view ourselves as a universal owner. We have over 2,000 portfolio companies. We cannot diversify away from risks such as climate change or AMR or biodiversity or whatever it might be. We have to address it somehow, and of course active ownership and stewardship is the key tool for us to do that. And we see it really as part of our fiduciary duty to protect portfolio value. And so of course it becomes very central then for us to work with the broad brush strokes, so to think about how we can, well, first of all, how can we think about this in terms of a root cause approach? So not just try to solve at the symptom level, but what is really the reason for why we have this problem in the first place, and go back. And sometimes that takes a bit of work to figure that out. But having done then to engage on a policy setting level, to think about standard setting, to think about the entire value chain or the entire industry, and try to take that broader perspective rather than just a single company or a single issue focus. I think that's the great distinction between, because what could be perhaps good for the portfolio over here, or for a single company over here, might have negative consequences over here. So you have to have this umbrella view on things. So that's at the core of it. And to do that, it's also very useful, of course, to work together with other like-minded investors who will also take a similar view, because that's when you can start actually having more of a lever in the changes you want to see. Mm-hmm. And so for biodiversity, if we come back to that, for example, we work in initiatives such as Nature Action 100 or the IPDD on deforestation, where we work also vis-a-vis governments, etc., and try to find investor initiatives where we can pool resources and work on a system level together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Just a thought on that, from the kind of collaborative perspective, to what extent is collaboration beyond that with other asset owners an important part of systems thinking? I'm thinking in terms of civil society organisations, academia, and the potential to for those different kind of perspectives to align with those of investors.
it is important, and academia not the least. It is important to link up to the scientific frontier, and also it can be a cross-fertilization where we can also provide data, etc., for academia to work with and insights, but also we can use, of course, a scientific lens on our work. So that link is very important. Civil society, we always keep our ear to the ground and have an interchange and dialogue with civil society. The difference, I think, is that civil society often has an agenda, which is absolutely fine, whereas research has less of an agenda. So you have to tune in maybe on different wavelengths sometimes with different types of actors, but absolutely all of these stakeholders are super important for us to link up to in various ways. And I feel that we have a very open discussion with many of our stakeholders. And policymakers, of course, is key here.
Indeed, we're very likely to come back to policy makers before too very long. But sticking with the kind of broad issue of universal ownership, you will know through your own research that the kind of limits and boundaries of asset owner influence is an area of fairly active research. And so, what are your thoughts in terms of the boundaries, the limits, the expectations that asset owners should set themselves, and what are the implications for stewardship and capital allocation?
Well, there are limits to what investors can do, of course. We cannot directly solve a geopolitical conflict, or we cannot write laws or decide what laws are going to be in place that could potentially help the systemic risks we're facing, etc. So there are certain things we can't and can do, and we will have to operate within the space that is ours. So in that sense, of course, there's limitations, but often there are, if you just think about it, there could still be ways to somehow connect to an issue. Oftentimes we can push for increased transparency, for example, and reporting, and that in itself can spur changes on the ground, the real changes we want to see. We obviously don't want anything to just stop at the reporting, but and we can be one part in the puzzle that moves an issue forward. But it is, of course, important to recognize what we can and what we can't do. And it's important to say, too, that we come at this from a financial perspective. So we are universal owners to protect portfolio value and for reasons of fiduciary duty more than anything, even if there is often a human or an ethical aspect to the issue as well. But our motivation is primarily financial, and that also may put some limits on what we can or should do.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's widely understood, that question of the asset owners acting very much from the point of view of the long-term material financial impacts?
I think it varies, but I think because a lot of the systemic issues are sustainability linked, and sustainability is inherently both a business issue, but it is also very much something else. Like, it is about our livelihoods, it connects much to the private sphere of our our daily lives and our futures and our values, etc., it gets, it's connected, both this financial other world and this more ethically grounded world. And we share a lot of the same concerns as we were talking about civil society organizations, but their motivation may be something else than an asset owner, for example, or any type of financial actor. So there is a blurred line there somewhere where we have a lot of shared interests, but maybe for different reasons, and therefore sometimes it can be difficult to meet, because we have to do things according to the financial logic.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. In the recent report that AP7 put out a few weeks ago on universal ownership, there's a number of different kind of aspects that you highlight as being tools and amplifiers rather that merit more attention. And those include bondholder stewardship, asset management, engagement, director votes, and one or two others, pre-disclosure of voting intentions. Which of those would you kind of highlight, perhaps, that you feel that is an area that you expect AP7 to include, more prominently in future in your approach?
I think we will explore all of these in different ways, but I would probably especially want to highlight expectation documents, something that we see some other actors do, and which actually academic research shows that if you publish an expectation document in a certain area, it is likely that companies will over time meet those expectations if you compare it with companies who are not in your portfolio and not linked up to your expectations, that the cohort that is in your portfolio will align with it over time. So, and I also think that it is, for any actor, it is also a very useful internal exercise to have to, and that's where, coming back to your first question about my role, I think communication is so much more than just summarizing things and put it out there. It is really a distillation of a lot of thinking that's been going on, and that once that's done, you can put it out there. And I think an expectation document can be just that, beyond the fact that it will be make it very clear to portfolio companies what you expect of them in a systems sort of context. It also can help the investor itself to be very clear on what it is, how we view various issues. So we at AP7 are going in that direction, and we'll start exploring expectation documents that we haven't published before. So I think that would be top of the list of the underused tools that we listed in this report.
That's very interesting. Will that be? Will those be expectations? Will be the presumably there'll be a mixture of specific to different sectors, or the AP7 view on particular themes, or a mix of approaches?
Yeah, on different themes. So that would be the way to do it. So that will be an interesting development work going into that.
Uh-huh.
But we also, among these tools, we also list things like collaborative stewardship, which we and many others have been doing over a long time. But there again, there's academic research that shows that how you compose these collaborative teams can make them more or less successful, and that depends not only on yourself and the issue, but also who is the target company. So there is an interesting academic article titled "Tailor to Target," where depending on how receptive the firm is, what their financial resources are, etc., etc. You can tailor your engagement coalition to better suit it. So I think investors potentially will become more and more sophisticated, building these collaborations and not just open the gates to anyone and anything and work with it that way, and be more and more strategic about how we collaborate to have the most impact that we can. So that's another interesting area to explore.
In both those examples, there's an element of taking a kind of long-term approach, a relationship-building approach, and really kind of wanting to kind of build kind of consensus over a period of time.
I think we have always viewed dialogue as what we try to do first, and should that stall or we need to make an extra push, that's when we would pull the voting card and file a shareholder resolution. I think part of it is cultural. The Scandinavian approach is very much consensus and try to work things out together, and we would view a shareholder resolution as more confrontational. But I know that in other markets it might be the opposite. You start off with a resolution, and that will set you off into being able to have a dialogue. So it could be different in different markets, but we find that this relationship building that you allude to, and a long-term relationship and dialogue is useful also to the company. And my own research previously when I was at the SSE showed that the most effective shareholder engagement is when you come to the table more as a partner than have this very confrontational approach. And if you can bring a business case to your issue, and if you can show an understanding of the complexities that the companies are facing, you will have a much bigger chance. And if you can, ultimately you want the same thing. You want the company to do well. You want to reduce risks of various kinds, and you want the context that the company is operating in to be as viable as possible.
Okay. Does just going back quickly to the expectation documents, will that extend to expectations for asset management partners?
I think it could, and that's one of the things we brought up in our report that we recently released too, how important it is that asset owners express their expectations on asset managers, maybe not the least in the times we're in right now, where asset managers might have some conflicting demands, and it's important to show that for us as asset owners to show what we think is important and what we expect, and that will also make life easier for asset managers to have clear directions from actors like ourselves. So for asset managers to be transparent, to work in certain ways, to represent also the systemic thinking that we have, etc., is of course key. So such an expectation document can be helpful, I think, both for us and for asset managers.
Okay. Now, one thing I was keen to get into really was the question of the resources, the skills, the tools that asset owners need in order to deploy some of these tactics effectively, particularly when we're thinking of engaging with policymakers. We know that certain sectors certain industries that are perhaps negatively impacted by efforts to address systemic risks are past masters at political influence, for example. I mean, that's one aspect of it. But I mean, how do you view the challenges of making sure that you have the right tools and skills and resources to leverage your influence?
I have to come back to collaborations. I think that's been very important for us and the community that we're in to work together, not the least with regards to policymakers, because single investors, it might be difficult to set up a whole public affairs department, and that would be quite resource intense. But by working together, look at Climate Action 100 Plus, for example, or there are numerous other examples, we can have that policy dialogue and work more intensely with that type of tool when we do it together and in those types of constellations. So I think that's one key thing. Here at AP7, we have also recently reorganized ourselves so that our sustainability team is now integrated into the asset management team, and I think that's been very useful for us so that we can work more integrated, and that also makes it possible for us to align more our goals and efforts in the sustainability sphere with our key operations in asset management. So that's another way to make sure that we use our resources in the best way possible.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Emma. Just one final question to wrap things back to COP30, where we started at the top of the conversation. We know that countries are behind with their NDCs, but we know also that it's a fairly kind of crucial kind of period, because we're looking ahead for the next 5 years. As owners and other parties look on to the COP in the Amazon, what do you think our expectations should be in terms of the ability of governments to address these two intertwined systemic risks?
Well, expectations are high because we have to make decisions in the right direction and accelerate the work that we are doing and have been hoping to do. I mean, this year it is 10 years since the Paris Agreement. We were all so excited, and a lot of good work has been done between then and now, but I don't think that 10 years ago we would have thought that we would not have come farther than we have in 2025. And we see this COP as an opportunity to more than before link together climate change and biodiversity, and for it to going forward be more of a joint conversation on those topics, because they are so closely interlinked, and for us as owners, that's also how we more and more start to think about it. And we hope, because as we touched on before, investors can do a lot, but we can also only do so much. We really need the political leadership, the policy changes, etc., to be there in order for us to do what we can do. And so we hope that this COP will leave us hopeful, and that it will be as a new starting point for the next coming 5 years.
Well, I think I'm happy to echo that. Emma Sjöström of AP7, thank you very much.
Thank you.